This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 57.
And it is achievable and it is doable. And there are some simple ways to get there. It doesn't have to be this, fantastic adventure right off the bat. It can be few small steps, few small changes that can really set you up for success.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Ehrman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here with my co-host, Mr. Matt, the Miracle Morning Rogers. Matt, what an episode we just recorded.
Honestly, we've said this a few times, but I don't know if we've had a guest we've had Mike as a guest, but I don't know if we've had an episode that we both needed to hear from more than what we just sat through. And just as I know this is going to be a little bit longer of an episode, it's well worth it. We got on before the episode and said, we'll be on for, 35, 40 minutes. The conversation was too needed. I think that's probably the best way to put it. It wasn't just too good. It was needed. I think a little bit of a therapy session paired with some action plans on how we can go forward in February. Oh, it was a great one. How did you walk away from this one?
So Mike Kuczala was our guest tonight, who we had on show 8, and we focused mostly on the kinesthetic classroom, which he has authored multiple books about, bringing movement into your classroom. And tonight he has a new book coming out about being at our peak as teachers, but it's really being at our peak as a person and habits and traits that we can emulate to reach that. And the conversation, he said multiple times, I didn't invent this. It's just a reminder. And that's what it really was. But there were things that we went through that I do, or I've tried, or I've incorporated that you lose sight of because it is difficult. The things that help us the most are a challenge. I recently heard on a podcast that, if you wanted a 6-pack, you would have it because everybody knows how to get a 6-pack. You eat well, you exercise. It's not a secret formula, but it's really hard to do. And so, Mike said that at times where these things can be simple, but it's really hard to take care of ourselves because it takes time, it takes effort, and it just takes intentionality in doing that. And so, I think this conversation is super important now in February, but it's one that, maybe teachers can go back and listen to every once in a while to recenter ourselves and also, getting his book to do that as well.
I think more than anything, so he does a great job of paring down kind of thoughts in 5 major kind of steps or kind of thinking points that make it feel a combination of obvious. Hey, yeah, this is an obvious point. I think that's the whole concept of something that you can remember. But more than anything, it's also the blueprint of how you create success with it and why it's a important thing to prioritize. Early on in the book, he talks about just we spread ourselves thin. That is the nature of us, caring about every and anything that we can, because we are people pleasers and helpers of others, and we kind of in our nature put others before ourselves, and we've done that for a long time. Our educational history has been like that for a while, and that ends up being a detriment at a certain point. So how can we pause that beforehand? I actually was thinking during this episode, I know we talked about having my student teacher join. And one of the things that he talks about early on is this idea of we've had conversations about bringing and doing too much early on, getting in the grind phase of setting your career and getting tenure and getting established in a community, those type things. That's really important, but it's also important not to burn out, because if you bite off too much, then you're not going to last. And so I think it's really helpful for any age teacher, any experienced teacher to listen into this episode.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So I don't want to delay this any further, and I want to jump into that really engaging, really genuine conversation that we had with Mike. So let's go ahead and bring him in now. Hi, Mike. Welcome back to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, thank you, Ken and Matt. Thank you for having me back. I'm really appreciative of you doing that. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So if you are unaware, if you didn't catch Mike on show 8, he is coming back for a second time to share some exciting news and developments that he has going on. And Matt, I'm going to be honest, I'm a little nervous having our first repeat guest here. Make sure we can bring our A game again for Mike. So for those of our listeners and viewers that did not catch your show, and I would suggest maybe go back and watch that as well, just reintroduce yourself and kind of just a snapshot of what your connection to education has been.
Sure. My name is Mike Kuczala, and kind of have two lives. I'm the academic director for an educational consulting company called Regional Training Center. We offer graduate courses to teachers in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland, and beyond. I run the instructional side of the business, but also people may know me about my work with a kinesthetic classroom. So I have that consulting life and the co-author of several kinesthetic classroom books and graduate courses. And I've just been so blessed with that career and being able to travel the world and deliver keynotes and provide professional development. I think most importantly, what's the most important thing to know about me is that I come from a family of teachers, wife, sister, both parents, 3 grandparents, an aunt, cousin. It's just what we do in my family. And I was in the classroom for 10 years. I'm a former band director, which I talk about in the book. So that gives you kind of a snapshot of my life and education. That's just what I'm about. I live in that space and I love it.
So with all of those experiences, your own as well as your large family tree of teachers, what would you say is something that you feel you've gained a perspective on in regards to education, in regards to being a classroom teacher that most people may not have by just being in the classroom and not having all those different connections and experiences?
Oh, I think at this point in my life, and it's something that we'll probably talk about in a bit, it's perspective. Um, we're and I, maybe the bigger thing is right now is all the pressure teachers are facing. I mean, that's something that I witnessed firsthand. I'm not in the classroom anymore, but I talk to teachers all the time. I'm in Twitter chat groups. Most of our graduate instructors are practicing classroom teachers, and I don't think people understand truly, even though you're reading more and more about the pressure teachers are under, and that comes back to perspective. And so, being at this part of my career, I'm able to look back and have some perspective on things that, when you're caught up in the moment, are hard to have that same perspective. After you go through certain life challenges, one of the things I talk about in the book, and one of the things that we may discuss at greater depth, over the past 5 years of my life, 6 years of my life, I buried both parents. My kids have moved on and they're living their adult life. This is going to sound, I hope it doesn't sound trivial, but after 17 years, had to put my dog down. I mean, all these life changes that happen, and you have to adjust and have a new perspective on things. And so things aren't quite as important as we make them out to be. in life, like Shakespeare's quote, like nothing is good or bad, it's thinking that makes it so. And so I think the big word here on your question is perspective.
I think that that perspective is obviously a great way to summarize how we need to view things right now. And I love your experience, your connection to family, and really how your family's intertwined with education. And so it is dinner conversations are about classroom activities. I was having a conversation with coworkers today. The one's husband's an electrician, the other is an app developer. And it's like, hey, I don't want to really know about, hey, I worked on this project as we're driving by this building, or whatever the case may be. Unfortunately, working in the people business, we are always looking and trying to have conversations around how we can support and make our time with kids, young or old, as meaningful as possible. And I think creating boundaries is a really difficult thing for us as educators. And I know that's kind of going into a little bit preview of what you talk about in this upcoming book, but it is recognizing that healthy balance. As someone who also has married another teacher, and Ken is in the same situation, marrying a teacher. It is a ongoing conversation that never ends. Can you just kind of talk about real quick what that boundary is and how you felt like you could manage turning it on and off, and recognizing in those environments, because we do have insight that other people don't necessarily have into education, and it can become a slippery slope.
Yeah, so it's interesting. As a former band director, I'll never forget my principal coming to me. Last job I had was a junior high, back when there was junior highs. And he said, I just want, in kind of modern language, he said to me, I just want you to know I see you. And there's no one else that understands the schedule you have. And I'm not taking anything away from what other people do. I didn't have the same intensity sometimes during the day that someone teaching fifth grade would have, but I was always on. I had rehearsals every night, just about. I had events on the weekends. My work with children was on very public display all the time, whether it was a Saturday night football game, concerts, competitions. It was just kind of craziness. And eventually I just had to say, okay, because I was getting caught up in it. I was having this huge stress. And I had to say, okay, I'm not going to be able to be there for my kids the way I should be if I don't create a boundary, if I don't look after myself first. And we all know that we need to be the best we can be for everyone else in our life. And the way we do that is by putting ourselves at the top of the list. We put everyone else at the top of the list first: our kids, families, jobs, students, whatever it might be, our jobs, our yards, the work we have to get done all the time. And we forget to put ourselves at the top of the list, so the rest of the list goes more smoothly and feels better. And I got to that point where I had to make that decision, and I shifted some things in my life. And that doesn't mean things don't catch up with you at times. They certainly do. But I learned that lesson pretty early.
Matt and I had not a debate, but we had a show, just him and I, talking about taking on extra responsibilities and kind of the ebbs and flows of your career, and how young teachers typically are, volunteering for every club, every committee, everything, because they're trying to expose themselves. They're trying to get themselves noticed, like you said, because they're vying for a contract, or they're trying to get a permanent position. And then you might reach a point where your own personal family starts up and starts to grow, and you have to take a back seat. And then maybe later in your career, when you're, like you were saying, Mike, your kids have moved out, so maybe you do have a little bit more time at home, less of a commitment at home, and you kind of step up to the plate again for your school, how important do you think it is for teachers to kind of recognize their own what's going on in their own life to be able to decide what they commit and how they commit and how much time they're committing to their school in addition to their classroom responsibilities?
Well, it's critical. They have to recognize it, or they're just simply going to burn out. We're in the people business. We are in the emotion business because we are our emotions. It's who we are. Like our whole life is about emotion. Like rarely does anything happen to you that doesn't change the way you feel, and rarely do you simply do anything that you're not trying to you're trying to change the way you feel purposefully. And so we are emotional creatures, and then we deal with all these kids who are also emotional creatures, and it sucks you in, and it's a real challenge. So if we fail to recognize those boundaries and recognize our space and recognize our own emotions first, we're not going to be as good for everyone else. What we're trying to do, it's so easy to get caught up in it that we forget to put these things first. And it's critical. It can be career ending if you don't. I wish every teacher would just say, hey, I'm number one, got to take care of me first, have to put time for me first, and everything else will fall into place, because then you become better at your job, better for kids, and more satisfied with your career.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that we have to learn it, and honestly, that's why I'm really excited about this conversation that we have planned for tonight. So, as Mike said in the beginning, he is the author of multiple kinesthetic classroom books. I will say they are by far one of my favorites that I've read, connected to education. And I'm not just saying that. I said it before, and I'm not just saying it now because he's sitting with us. It's one that is super easy to read. It's very practical, and it just gives you hundreds of activities for you to implement into your classroom. And once you read it and you find your favorites, it's that one I always keep by my side that, if I feel that my class needs it, I go right to it. After one of the shows, Matt and I were planning something for him to do school wide, and I rattled off 3 activities that I suggested, and I'm pretty sure at least 2 of them were directly from your book. So I'm excited to learn about the new one that you have coming out. So we've kind of mentioned it a couple times. So what's the title, and kind of what's a big picture view of the book, and then maybe we'll dive into some of the specifics that are included.
Yeah, so the book is called The Peak Performing Teacher: 5 Habits for Success. They are not the only habits that you can create in your life to create a great life. They are 5 that have really spoken to me. And then, I went out and just found the research that supported it. And I've always known through the decades that the research did support these things, and wanted to write about it. And what I say in the beginning of the book is that this book is just a reminder. I didn't invent any of these concepts. Of course, I didn't. I'm just here to remind you of what's important, and just to think about a few of these concepts and topics that are told through my stories and my lenses and my filters, and hopefully it helps. Hopefully it makes an impression, they're just the things that you can do, and you have to do everything, of course, but just some things you might think about to create a life that you feel satisfied with and feel successful at and feel emotionally engaged in, so you're better for both yourself and your students.
I think jumping into early on as an elementary teacher, I appreciate that you start with the ABCs that feel very achievable to kind of enter maybe even the perspective, hey, I'm ready to consider shifting self first in this situation, and prioritizing. I love, you have a line that kind of covers that. If you prioritize yourself, and if you take your life seriously and you invest in yourself, that your life will take you seriously and provide a lot of opportunity going forward. Can you just kind of talk about how you set yourself up with these habits of success? What do you kind of, I guess, would I say, or what I ask of you, what would you like a reader opening your book mindset wise coming in to get the most out of the experience reading it?
That you can do this. If I could just do a little bit of history, I've been wanting to write this book since the late 90s. Always been a fan of peak performance. I've been a student of life. I'm kind of a living experiment for myself about what might work and what might not work. Big Tony Robbins fan, and I wrote to Tony Robbins and said, hey, what are you doing for teachers? And I've done a lot of his work, CDs, books. I've spent a week with him in Las Vegas, Business Mastery in 2014. And his people wrote back, very nice, very kind letter saying, good luck. And here's some books for your library. They sent me all his books for the library at the school I was teaching at the time, which was great. And I tried to have conversations around the peak performing teacher back then, because what is it that we can do, that we can be our very best and be in joy and in love and feel on fire doing it for students? It is possible to get there. And right now, there's probably people listening to this, thinking you're nuts, because right now it's the most stressful time in the history of American education, but you've never needed this more. And it is achievable and it is doable. And there are some simple ways to get there. It doesn't have to be this, fantastic adventure right off the bat. It can be few small steps, few small changes that can really set you up for success. So I just want people and teachers to know that it is achievable and they can do this, and just to keep an open mind as they read through the book. And hopefully when they read it, they'll think, oh yeah, you know what? That's absolutely true. I've had that experience as well. And that's why, one of the things I think we'll get to eventually, but the morning routines at the end of the book, that's why I asked real teachers, practicing classroom teachers, elementary school teachers, high school teachers, administrators, what are you doing in the morning? Because I saw that you are a very successful professional. These people are really highly accomplished. So I was guessing, I did not know that they had some kind of morning routine. These people have podcasts like you. They are graduate instructors. They have businesses. They are in their state organizations, and they're very accomplished. And as it turns out, everyone that I asked except one had a very specific, and I was kind of blown away at their morning routines. So it's all doable. It's never written to make you think, oh my gosh, I can't do this. It's written to say, here's what's possible.
Matt, do you have a consistent morning routine?
Yeah, every single morning. I mean, I don't know if you care to hear it, but it is every single morning. Do you want to know? Is that?
Yeah, go
All
ahead.
Right. So right now our morning routine, my wife is recovering and has been for 2 years from a foot injury that is nagging. And through that, we decided, my wife being a teacher in 4th grade with me. And so I wake up every morning at around 6:15. We just got a puppy. I don't know why. I love her to death. You may have heard her earlier in this episode or later on, hopefully not. But we take them out, feed them, and take them for about a half an hour walk in the morning. I make lunch, get water bottles set, and that's about as much time as it takes my wife, Kristen, to shower and get dressed, because it is just an absolute nightmare. And so at that point, we're usually on the walk listening to a podcast, usually a motivational podcast or something. I often will write my reminders for that day and kind of create a framework so that when I'm driving to school, I talk to my mom every morning and take about the last 5 minutes to just get our game face on, because the moment that we walk in that building, it's even though kids don't show up for another 40 minutes, every moment counts. So that's my morning routine. What about you, Ken?
Well, first, let's have Mike tell us how good or bad.
Okay.
It is.
All right.
No, just.
You know what? I'm not my personality to say it's good or bad, but it's whatever speaks to you emotionally. It's what see, when I listen to you talk about that, you're pretty engaged. And I feel like when you get to school that day, you are better off for having that morning routine. Something that is structured, something that engages you, something that gets you physically active, which you do by taking the puppy for a walk, which is one of the best things you can do in the morning to turn your brain on and be ready for the day. And then you feel like you've done something in the morning and you're ready to go. You're also giving your wife some time to do her thing. I'm very sorry about this. She's dealing with that. So I think it's pretty
We'll take
solid.
solid. I'll take a B. Maybe that's a high grade. I don't know. What about Ken? What's your morning routine with 3 little ones at home?
Yeah. So with that, I would say probably the last 3 years, I've really tried to focus on my morning routines. And it starts with trying to go to bed on time so that I can wake up early. So, I do have 3 kids. My oldest is not quite 4 yet, and there's no twins in there. And so, morning routines for me have been trying to wake up early, wake up before everybody else. I've played around with some basic like stretching exercise routines that don't take much time. And then that's when I hunker down and I do work. So for a long time, I was trying to, one of my top priorities is I do not do any work the moment I get home until a little bit after my kids go to bed. It's all dad time. And then after that, I try to do my best that my wife and I have time as well. But I was finding that I was not super productive late at night. And so I committed myself to not doing too much work at night, waking up earlier, and I found that I was much more productive in the morning. So it's, light stretches or some sort of light exercise, not even breaking a sweat, make my coffee, and I get to work. And whether that's on this podcast, whether that's some of the other things I do, or even starting early for, my school district work. But one of my biggest challenges is the age of my kids. I have countless sleepless nights. I can't remember the last time I slept completely through the night. And so there are times where waking up is a huge struggle for me, but it ruins my day. When I do not have at least part of that morning routine, the rest of the day is a drag for me. I just feel like I'm behind. I feel like I missed out on something, and then it pulls at me to I feel distracted when I'm home with my kids. It's tough. And I really think a morning routine is super important, and not necessarily when you wake up, but just having that thing that centers you for the day.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's a great perspective. It's a great attitude. And it reminds me that there was one individual that I asked about their morning routine. They said, Mike, I've got 3 young kids. Same thing. You don't want to know about my morning routine. So we left it at that. On the other hand, one of the teachers I interviewed is a 3rd grade teacher in Colorado. And she is up at 4:30 every morning, and she works out. That's her thing. Gives her more energy, gives her more stamina, gives her more strength. It prepares her focus and it prepares her mentally for the day. And even in the summertime, whenever weekends, whatever, she's up at 4:30 because she just sets herself up for success that way. That takes a lot of discipline, and I applaud you both for your morning routines. And I have a specific thing that I do in the morning as well. And I just think it sets yourself up for clarity, and you're already feeling accomplished before you get into the classroom with kids. And they deserve that, right? Nothing best than the very best you have to give every day. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned earlier the 5 critical practices, I believe is the way you phrased it, to increase productivity. So do you mind sharing what those 5 are, maybe just by name or title, and any information you want to provide
I
or
don't
go
know
through
if
them?
I don't know if I'll get the titles absolutely correct from the chapters in the book, but habit 1 is living the physical life. And I think we'll probably come back and talk about each of these. Habit 2 is managing your stress through changing your mind. Habit 3 is sharpening your mental game. Habit 4 is practicing gratitude. And habit 5 is morning routine creation. So those combination of the 5 habits and whatever works in your life is what I'm suggesting that you just think about, consider, reflect upon, and how can I move forward with those things?
So hearing those before we dive into them, is this mostly focused on what we're doing outside of the classroom and our daily habits, or are they things that are happening in the classroom or blending across both of those pieces?
Completely away from the classroom. Yeah, I mean, if you can get some of the work done that you want to, that what, that's not true, because I don't want you to stop practicing gratitude when you're with students. Of course not. Um, uh, you know, hopefully your mental game is sharpened when you're with your kids the entire time. And I also in the book talk about some classroom practices as well, how you can take some of these habits into the classroom with you. So the premise of the book is that, hey, yeah, by the time you get to the door, what have you done to prepare yourself? Which of these habits do you employ on a regular basis to make you the best you can be? Will they spill over into your classroom and your school day? Of course. And there's ways too, someone who practices gratitude all the time, it's a real habit for them. They will carry that into their teaching. There's many benefits, research benefits, practicing gratitude, but with students or teaching them how to do it. So there is spillover, but basically it's about getting yourself ready for the day before you walk in the door.
I think we, as educators, hear a lot about how kids come to our doors and they have all sorts of factors that may adjust how they are showing up that day, whether it's lack of sleep or, parents work third shift or maybe food insecure. There's all sorts, they share a bedroom with a sibling, any of those factors that we could justify. But I think you cover this kind of in your forward of just kind of getting to recognize almost the baggage that you have coming into the classroom. And I think you're alluding to this, and I look forward to hearing how we adjust those things. But we have this responsibility to almost be numb to the idea of all of our challenges when there are a bunch of kids in front of us or professional responsibilities. And I think that's where I have a coworker whose husband's a baseball player, and his theme is get your mind right. So, when on they actually play at the local baseball team and they have a hashtag that are the initials, get your mind right. And it's just get yourself in the mindset to be prepared, because the moment you walk through those doors, everyone has factors pulling on them. It's how can you segment that? How can you compartmentalize that and not ignore that it's happening, not ignore that you have challenges or even things you're looking forward to, but how do you allow yourself to be fully tuned into those hours that you have very precious cargo in front of you, these sponges of information, and you can really put your best foot forward in that instructional time.
Yeah, so the kids depend on the fact that you can do that. You're the professional in the room, you're the adult in the room, of course. And where there's overlap now from your last question is, something we talked about in chapter 2, and that's practicing mindfulness. You have all this stuff going on in your world, and most stress happens right between the ears about something that did happen or something that could happen. But when we practice mindfulness and when we are paying attention to the moment, which our kids are depending upon, you really can't be stressed unless what's in front of you is stressful. But at least you're paying attention to what you need to. So those things get left at the door. Kids are depending on that. And we know that the brain prioritizes information on 3 levels: survival, emotion, and then the cognitive. But we need the kids to be at the cognitive level, so we have to employ things, and we have to do that for ourselves as well. I mean, to just things like, there's so much talk about social emotional learning these days, and I've seen so much going on in my brain right now. I mean, just greeting kids at the door, just a handshake and eye contact raises dopamine levels in the brain, feel good neurotransmitter. And, the whole thing with ACEs these days and adverse childhood experience. I had one of the big proponents, one of the big mouthpieces for this is Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. And I had the pleasure of being on the same keynote docket with her at a conference in California. She was fascinating to listen to, and what these kids have to deal with and what that might transpire or turn into as an adult and their physical health. Just a lot going on in front of us at all times, as teachers know. And when we are mindful, when we can leave those things and be ready and able for the kids, the better off they're going to be.
I would highly suggest Dr. Harris's book. I had the chance to read. We actually read it as a teacher seminar and was an awesome inclusion to, again, just understand from even the medical side, the perspective of ACEs and how that influences kids walking into your door. So how incredible. That's amazing to be in that position. And I have a question to ask you all. I'm going to save it for a little bit later. I want to get into the book, but a special event's coming up tomorrow, and I'd be thrilled to get your perspective on it. But we'll leave that as a teaser. So, jumping into the first main principle, which I think was physical based kind of stimulation and what those needs are. Can you kind of lead in and kind of give an introduction into that principle?
Yeah, living the physical life. So this is kind of my passion and love, and it's something that we overlook. We kind of take it for granted, but on so many levels, our brain needs our body to move. Our brain begs our body to move. We are brain-body creatures, and we can't get away from it. That's not the mindset we've had about school learning. First of all, that's one big example of living the physical life, right? Learning doesn't happen from the neck up. It happens from the feet up because we are these brain-body creatures. And so, what we know about being physical is that, especially with exercise, your brain is one of the primary beneficiaries of the benefits of aerobic, and we're also finding out anaerobic activity, right? And so at my age, I've always been a very physical person, exercised all my life, still continue to do it, but I don't look at it from a physical perspective. I don't use it for weight loss. At my age, that's much more about diet. For me, it's about mental health. We know it's anti-anxiety. We know it's antidepressive. We know it's pro-motivation. But even things like I'm thinking about Amy Cuddy's TED Talk. And one of the things I didn't know about Amy, have you seen Amy's TED Talk? It's one of the most viewed ever. It's about body language, right? She's a graduate of Conrad Weiser High School, which is really interesting. You should check out her TED Talk sometime. But she talks about these power positions and how, when your body's in powerful positions, your testosterone rises and your cortisol lessens compared to when you're maybe sitting cross-legged, arms are crossed, or, maybe like this, and our testosterone levels lower. So there's the bottom line is your physiology can change your psychology. So when you're not feeling good, you're feeling kind of maybe a little anxious or a little depressed, stop for a second and notice what you're doing with your body. It's probably not in a great position. You can automatically change that, shoulders back, smile on face, put your body into give it some inertia, get some movement going, physical activity, and you have the possibility of changing how you feel. The other thing that a physical life does, like one of the keynotes I've been giving recently for physical educators, is about how, I call it the story of my physical literacy, but I give credit to my physical life for key moments throughout my life. Like when I look back at real turning points where my life changed for the better in incredible ways, there was always a physical challenge that preceded it and a physical success that I experienced. My definition of success. Quick, for instance, like running the Broad Street Run. First time I did that, 2009. 10-mile road race. And, I'd never run more than 4 miles in my life. And that was in February. The race was in May. I found someone to train me. But the process of getting to that point, that day when I crossed that finish line in whatever place I finished, 8,000 or 9,000 or whatever it was, changed my life. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could do anything. I was flying high from a physical experience. And less than 7 months after that race, my first book was published. It's what put me over the edge. That's happened 3 or 4 times in my life. And I detail those things to let the physical education teacher know that they are, in my estimation, if not one of the most critical teachers in any school building or district because of what they do. It's just not, at this point in time in our educational history, it's gaining ground, but it's not recognized as much as such. So we're meant to live a physical life. Sedentary is no good on so many levels. If there's nothing else you do from listening to this or reading that book, do that. Get yourself moving every day. You want to keep your brain healthy as you age. You want to feel better. There's probably nothing better that you can do than putting on your sneakers and moving. Just so many incredible benefits. And so for me, that's the cornerstone. And that's why it's chapter 1.
That makes total sense. And it obviously fits into your background with the kinesthetic classroom and the ways that you're creating those movements with your students. And, I think one of the questions or concerns that teachers are going to have with hearing this information is they'll recognize it's important, but, it's going to be, when do I have time for that? How do I have time for that? And if you can find ways to either build it into your morning routines or build it into your day or build it into your instruction, make sure that you are taking some notes from the kinesthetic classroom and you are having everyone stretch or do 5 squats or do 5 push-ups, or you're finding a walking partner. If you're an elementary teacher and you have recess duty, walk on recess duty. There's no reason whatsoever that you need to stay stationary during that time. As a secondary teacher, your schools are typically much bigger. So try to take advantage of just walking the halls on a prep or, even taking your kids on a walk to have a conversation. So, finding those ways to kind of hack it into your day, I think is important as well.
And can I just sneak this in? I mean, we know now, without a doubt, decades of research, physically fit kids do better academically. It's like to have that knowledge and information and not do anything with it, which is still the case in the majority of schools in this country. I'll just say that that's devastating for kids, and they just need to be given the opportunity. They create a more efficient brain. And even kids who are not physically fit, when they are exposed to acute bouts of aerobic activity, their brains are on fire for about the next hour. So how can you take advantage of that in a school system? I mean, obviously I could go down this road for days, but
Yeah.
I'll stop it there. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So habit number 1, we see the importance and the value in that. I'm blanking on what number 2 was. I keep thinking gratitude, but I don't think that was the next one you said. But you can jump into that or the second one that
That's
you mentioned.
okay. Yeah, no, the second habit is around managing your stress through changing your mind, which for me is in 2 parts. And so in the beginning of the chapter, I talk more about perspective and how stress is not really good or bad. It just is. Everything is given a meaning. It doesn't come with inherent meaning. You give it to it. So one person's stress is another person's joy. It's just all about perspective. And I also talk about reframing things, cognitive reframing. How can I reframe this situation? I found myself today. I paid more for a car bill that I wasn't expecting today than I wanted to. And it's like, after a while, I was like, what are you upset about? And it was that car bill, because I felt myself like a little anxious. And it's like, Mike, you know what? Or hang on, time out, change your perspective, get grateful, practice some gratitude here, and how awesome it is that I get to go take my car to someone who can fix it so well and be done with it and move on. And I was done with it at that point in time. So I talk about reframing things. I talk about a situation that happened to me as a band director that kind of changed my world for the better. I thank that parent now. And in the face of a pandemic, you might read that and think, well, that's the only thing you were dealing with. But it's my thing. I was giving it the meaning. I had the wrong perspective on it. But it took me to the next part of the chapter, changing your mind through meditation, through mindfulness, through things like autogenic training. So I learned how to become a meditator because that situation in my school, I wasn't sleeping. My blood pressure was rising. A parent had questioned me. How dare they? That might seem the least of someone's worries, but to me at that point in time was the worst thing. If you knew me and how I view life, that was the worst thing that could happen to me. And I had all these physical symptoms from it. So I learned how to meditate. I've been meditating for decades now. And I could sit in the middle of a stadium at a rock concert, sit down and get into my space. And it just changes your perspective on things. It changes your brain. We know that. And that changes your perspective on living. And it gives you a fantastic perspective. So there's different ways to change our minds through daily practice, and also learning how to reframe things and sit back and maybe have a different perspective on something. So that's what the second habit is about.
I think it's a really helpful thing to point out, and it's something that to transition to today's teaching, we are all feeling stretched. I feel like a fairly uh, spread out rubber band. Not sure what the breaking point is, but knowing that I'm stretched further today than I've ever been before. And that idea of even gaining back a little less tension, just even if it's a tiny bit less, is what we're living for, and taking a moment to recognize, Mike, I don't know from your end of things in the classroom, because you had a very, your day was so much longer and so much more involved beyond the bell ringing at the end of the day with other requirements. But I know for me, I find specials when I'm dropping kids off, or lunch and recess, as a reset and regather to make it through the next performance, because teaching is so involved, that the idea of using mindfulness and during the pandemic, the Calm app was available. So going through that guided meditation was a great introduction. And I created just even a peaceful scene that I picture in my head is what I often go to, as just to slow my breathing, reset, and revisit what our priorities are. And it allows me to enter that next teaching with a clearer mindset and make it more purposeful. Ken, sorry to cut you off there.
I was just going to say, it's, it can sound like such a simple idea of, saying, this is what's stressing me out. No, I'll just think about it this way. But we so often do not take the time to identify that and think about that. And I heard two things on different podcasts that really resonated with me. One, that the guest said he was at a terrible time in his life, and he just started to tell himself that I never have bad days. And he told himself that every day. And then 3 or 6 months later, someone asked him, how you doing today, sir? And his response without thinking was, I never have a bad day. And that's been his mindset since, for decades now. And another one was, instead of thinking, I can't believe my car didn't start today, why don't you think every other day, I can't believe my car started today, how lucky am I? It's just a simple way. And when you tell yourself that, like you said, Mike, changing your mind, you actually tell yourself that, you convince yourself of that, it really does change things. I constantly, my teammates have in my role in my district, whether it was when I was in 5th grade, now as a coach, I've always been dubbed like the calming presence, or the recentering of the group. And I just always have the mindset of, we get to work with kids every day. Like, what's the point of stressing out? We're just here to grow and develop young children and young adults. And, in my mind, there's nothing to stress about. Have fun. If you're having a stressful day, just bag what you're going to do and do some sort of fun activity that brings the class together, and let your stress, just go away with that mindset. So it does sound simple, but at the same time, it's tough because you have to make that commitment to be able to do that.
Yeah, most things that are really powerful are simple and difficult to employ, right? It's like losing weight. It's not a complex equation, but it's really difficult to employ because who wants to be hungry? No one likes that feeling. And so we have to, anchor our nervous system around where we, what we equate pain, what we equate pleasure. It's another conversation, but the same thing. You're allowed to change your perspective. Some of the things that both of you are saying are true, but you're allowed to do it. We just don't take advantage of those simple things. That's why I say about the book, it's a reminder. I didn't invent this stuff. Just reminding you that you are allowed to take advantage of these things, and they often seem very simple, and we don't take advantage of them. So you actually have to work on changing your perspective, work on changing your mind. And if you, like, we all know about meditation, and I challenge anyone, maybe there's people listening who are constant meditators, but honestly, when's the last time you meditated? Have you learned how to meditate? Have you taken the time to actually really work on that practice, understanding and knowing what the benefits could be, which are huge? So we just have to take advantage of these things, pick the ones out that speak to us, and go after it.
Yeah, definitely. So let's jump into number 3.
Number 3, sharpening your mental game. So this is around personal mission and goal setting. And we set goals with kids, and are you taking advantage of it in your own life? Do you know what your personal mission is? Do you have a personal mission statement? Something that you can align your life's decisions to. Does this align me with my mission, or does this move me away from my mission? What am I passionate about? What values do I hold? And there's a series of questions in the book that I describe that allow you to reflect upon some of these types of questions so that you can create a personal mission statement. Then when you write goals, and goals I don't set goals for everything. I'm not suggesting anyone do, but it's kind of a fundamental of life. If I want to achieve this, what is it that I need to do? So goals tell the brain, okay, I'm here and I want to be here. It creates a good pressure. It creates a good energy. It creates a good motivation. And if you're willing to do something that I call PLAN, it's an acronym, and I'll probably get it wrong if I try to talk it out loud. But if you're willing to go through the process of creating goals, creating an action plan, assessing if it's working or not, it's really pretty simple stuff. And moving to plan B if plan A doesn't work. Moving to plan C if plan B doesn't work. Moving to plan D if plan C doesn't work. But most of us don't even get through the action plan. It won't fail you. Eventually, you'll hit that goal if you keep reassessing what's going on and how you want to move forward. I also suggest to people they keep their goals short. If you have a goal for a semester as a student, I want to get an A, and halfway through the semester you've got a C- average, you're in trouble. What happens to motivation levels, right? They just drop. But after a week, if you didn't hit a goal, well, now I can assess, see if it worked, go back to it, and my motivation levels are still high. And if I achieve my goal, my motivation levels are even higher to go into week 2. So keep your goals short and simple. Align them back with your personal mission. And again, I'm not suggesting that we do that for everything, but if we have something we really want to achieve, map it out. Give your brain something to focus on and give it a plan to work at so that you have the steps necessary to make that goal come to fruition.
Go ahead, Matt. I was going to ask you, are you a goal setter?
Am I a goal setter?
Mm-hmm.
I am a goal setter, not a great in the middle. Like monitoring the goal and keeping up with it. But oftentimes I try to keep the goals pretty small that it is achievable pretty easily. More of a list, hey, what's accomplished off the list, more so than goal setting. What about you?
I'm gonna have a goal setter. I'm, like anyone, I don't know that I always follow through or always accomplish. For the most part, I feel that I do, and it was something that I was really passionate about doing with my students as well. Um, Especially parent teacher conferences, setting goals as a team, and something I recently heard is, you should have dreams, and then goals are stepping stones to reach your dream. So they're not, the goal is, how to accomplish your dream. And so, I think it's definitely one of those things that can be brought into the classroom as well.
And you really have to understand, and your kids need to understand, your students, you got to understand your why. That's a big question these days. What's your why? Because that brings in the emotional piece. All learning is emotional, all accomplishment is emotional, life is emotional. And, when we understand our why around a goal, we become that much more excited about it. And the other thing I like to tell people is, hey, when you set a goal, what are you going to do immediately? You never leave the sight of a goal without doing something towards its attainment, because you want to create that energy, you want to create that motivation, create that effort. So what are you doing right then and there? You set the goal, you created the action plan, you listed your why, you listed your support person, someone you're going to report to, which research actually says works. And then, what are you going to do immediately? And, one of the things I talk about in the book is that Broad Street run. And so, I mean, if you're going to, it's a big deal because it changed my life. But one of the first steps was, you might research sneakers, something. What are you going to do immediately so you have momentum?
To add to that, if you don't mind me referencing, I liked your thought process on the power of must. Do you mind if I just share what you have in here? So I love the paragraph. It just says, what was misguided became informed. What was informed became a dream. What was a dream became a vision. What was a vision became a goal. And what was a goal became a must. And what was a must became an action. And I just feel like, that is really the prioritization of a lot of things in our lives. As we gather information, it kind of elevates itself into that level of priority. And when it gets to that level of must, then that action plan is so important. And so, Ken, talking about that goal setting side of things, maybe you're leaning into the must. I think a lot of us operate on, we're creating the action plans on the must do situations, let alone the things that we would like to do. And sometimes our goal setting is based off of need and this must, which is a totally comfortable and reasonable place to build your next steps. It's just, how can you use that need to be as productive as possible?
Yeah. How do you turn shoulds into musts? That is the big thing. And I was referencing that, what you read, I was referencing a woman who had taken a graduate course with me some time ago. And, I don't know what, I forget the exact number. She lost 50, 60 pounds. She got up every morning, had a morning routine, started working out. And she was 47 years old. This was not a 23-year-old. It took some real effort to do that. But she got disturbed, right? Our brain will often respond to pain more than pleasure. So if you can think about what it might cost your life if you don't do this, what it might cost your family, what it might cost your career if you don't do this, that gets us disturbed, and that can help us turn a should into a must.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, what's number 4? I believe it's gratitude.
You've been waiting for that one, Ken.
Yeah, what was really?
Yeah, this is something that my wife has really been pushing for us to do more. It's not something that I will say that I ever really practiced before. I'm very thankful for a lot of what I have, what I've had as a child, what people have done for me, but I never really deliberately practiced gratitude until the last, I'd say, year or so. So I'm really anxious to hear about this.
Yeah, I can't. I'm really excited for both of you to read that chapter, because I'm really excited about that chapter, because I pulled in a friend of mine actually who ran a very successful business, and now has another business all based in gratitude. He called it a life improvement business. So it wasn't about selling cars. It was an automobile dealership. It was about improving someone's life. And they just put gratitude into everything that they did. Someone came into his office, had something to complain about or had a problem. He said, hold on, before we go there, what are you grateful for right now? Changes their whole psychology, their whole physiology, and then they can have a good conversation. At different times during the day, even if it was someone who was working in the auto body shop, they would stop and they'd have a gratitude circle, and they go around. What are you grateful for? This whole life improvement idea and his perspective on gratitude is amazing. And the answers to the question of, well, what did this do for the bottom line? Because in business, and he just rattled off best ever, best ever, best ever, best ever, because people buy in. If they didn't buy in, this place is not for me. You're all kooks and nuts. We thanked them. We threw them a party. You're here if you ever need us again. But that's just how they operated, and it weeded people out naturally. And I try to then in the book equate some of those ideas into the classroom. Aren't we in the life improvement business? And he keeps a gratitude journal every day. And so what that helps him to do is, during the next day, if he knows he has to write in his journal the next morning, which he keeps on his phone, he's mining for gratitude that day. So he's looking for things to be grateful for. Now, some of the research says that gratitude journals work better for people if they do it like once a week. I think for the average person, sometimes thinking about what they have to be grateful for every day can become overwhelming. I think that's where that research comes from. But gratitude is so exciting because for almost free, and in the next few moments, you can change your perspective and you can change your emotional state instantly through gratefulness. That's power. Why would you not implement that?
One of the things, not to reference my wife again, but one of the things that we've been trying to change our mindset on is we've been lucky to have other people assist us in different ways, helping with the dogs or offering meals along the way. And we were approaching it a lot with apologies. Oh, we're so sorry to inconvenience you. Oh, we're so sorry by this. I wish we weren't in this position. And early on, we shifted to just expressing our thanks. And no one necessarily benefited either way from that I'm sorry compared to the thankfulness, but it was a lot easier and it connected with more people to spread thankfulness and appreciation. And it was a huge, I guess it extended the conversation. It was a way for us to extend the conversation, knowing that we were banking and depending on these other people. And it rose both parties, as opposed to the apologizing and almost using it. And the framing is so important. Identifying gratitude, identifying appreciation, looking at a situation that, this may not be the best situation for you right now, but you haven't had to deal with it for a while, is such a more healthy way that doesn't kind of wreck your future plans at all. And there's a lot to be grateful for. We all have lots of things going on, and we can all rattle that list off. And one parent email or one call to the principal's office or any of these features can just completely shift that. But if you can adjust it, adjust that view, adjust that lens, it's super powerful. I think for us recording this on February 1st, I don't know if there's a better time to be listening or having this conversation right now.
Well, yeah, I hope so. And what I want to say to you is that one of the great gifts you can give anyone is the ability for them to retain their gift of giving. And thank you works so much better than I'm sorry, I'm a burden. Um, that, when you give, and when you're grateful, your heart just swells. And when you have too much of something, what do you want to do? You want to give it away. And so great, it's just this great cycle and great circle. And by allowing people to give and being gracious for that, it's a really great gift that you give.
What do you think are the best ways for teachers or just, people to practice gratitude? So you mentioned a journal, is writing it important? Is saying it out loud? Is it something that you should be communicating with, someone that's very close to you, which would be maybe your spouse or your best friend or a parent? What are there best practices for showcasing and practicing gratitude?
Yeah, there's lots of ways to do it, from the gratitude journal, even just 3 things each morning or once a week. What are you grateful for? You can just practice it during the day through mining for gratitude. That's just kind of a personal reflection. I'm going to be grateful for this and this. I'll write about it in my journal tomorrow. But what the research says, probably the most powerful way to do. There's lots of thank you notes. I'm a habitual thank you note writer. My mom instilled that in me as growing up. She always made us do that. But what I wrote about in the book and what the research says is that writing a gratitude letter to somebody give you months of happiness and give the receiver months of happiness. And what I share in the book is a letter that I wrote to my mom not that long before she died. I'm not going to be able to talk about it, but you can read it in the book. And she deserved that, and I did it. And it's the only time I've done it in my life. I should make more of a habit of it. And so, but it gave her just as much joy as it still gives me. So that's one powerful way to do it. And I started doing it with teachers in our wellness graduate course, and it was so powerful for people. Like, how many times have you heard about someone writing a letter, going to the person, or even mailing it, or better yet, going to the person and reading it to them in the same room? It's just really a powerful experience that can have lasting effects.
Yeah, I can remember when I was teaching fifth grade, I think I had an experience where someone that had supported me for a long time did something, and I deliberately thanked them. I don't know if it was through a letter, but it prompted me to have my class just stop and say thank you to somebody and write something meaningful. And one of the students in my classroom wrote it to a fourth grade teacher across the hallway. And I said, I want you to take that letter right across the hallway right now, and I want you to either give it to him to read in front of you or read it right to him. And, I could see how much that teacher just genuinely, authentically appreciated it, because it was from a student based on his personality that I don't really think the teacher knew he had such a large impact on. Um, it would be kind of one of those under the radar kids. And so for him to hear that and feel that, I know was a really powerful experience. So I do think it's super important for us to do as much as possible, because there are so many people that you are grateful for, or things that you are grateful for, that they don't necessarily recognize or realize. And it's definitely something that we should practice as often as possible.
Yeah, what teacher out there doesn't like getting that note, either from a kid currently or from someone who they had 10 years ago? That's like gold to a teacher. So why not give that gift to someone else? Can you think of 3 or 4 or 5 people who deserve that thank you note or deserve that letter? Change your life today. Change their life. Make it happen. Write the letter, take it to them, and read it to them.
Yeah, definitely. So not that I want to cut that conversation short, but let's jump into our last habit here.
Yeah, so we've had some extensive conversation around it already. Creating a morning routine, that old cliche: win the morning, win the day. And I have my own morning routine. You both described yours earlier, and sometimes mine includes working out. Sometimes it doesn't. I work out at different points in my day when it's available to me, but I definitely meditate every day in the morning. And I have a very carefully crafted visualization that I use music with. Uh, it's a combination of gratefulness and goal setting at the same time for my life around people and around career, around my physical health. And I kind of started that after spending a week with Tony Robbins and doing something called a priming activity. You can go to YouTube, you can Google Tony Robbins priming activity and go through it with him. But I did it live with like 1,000 other people. And it was pretty spectacular, pretty fantastic thing. And then I kind of shaped into my own thing. So I go to YouTube, I put in inspirational music. I have some selections that I use specifically. I put on my headphones and I do my visualization. By the time I'm done with this thing, I'm ready to jump out of bed and tackle anything. That's my point. I calm myself through meditation, and then I get myself worked up. Every once in a while, if I have a job to do, even if I'm not in the morning or meditating or whatever, I'll put on that type of really fantastic inspirational movie music, and it's kind of goofy and it's just my own little thing in my office, but makes the job easier, right? I'm a former band director, so I use music all the time, kind of thematic ways. But the bigger picture was interviewing these practicing classroom teachers and finding out how fantastic their morning routines were. It's just unbelievable what they were accomplishing, but they credit their success in their professional life and their personal life to this morning routine. So I encourage you to check those out and see if there's something that you can try to accomplish in the morning before you get to school.
I think working in the margins is the way I like to perceive it. And Ken, I know you said you found working in the morning is so much more productive than working in the evening when I feel spent and exhausted and the layers of everything that's kind of gotten on top of me. Choosing when you can, obviously requirements, kids are asleep and everything's taken care of that needs to be, is utilizing a morning and creating 15, 20 extra minutes in the morning to establish this routine is so much more productive than those 20 minutes you stayed up later in the evening. So if you can make that even simple shift, I know from my end, even stamina wise, those are just much more valuable minutes, as I'm sure we'll read about in that chapter.
No, yeah, that's just it. It doesn't have to be a fantastic morning routine. Fantastic is perspective, right? Just something, one of these habits, if it's a stress management piece or if it's a physical activity or goal setting in the morning, what sets you up for success in your day? Even if it's 5-10 minutes, get up 5-10 minutes earlier and create that little morning habit. Some people like it. 2 or 3 of the teachers that I interviewed mentioned making their bed. That's part of their morning routine. It makes them feel good. It makes them feel organized. It makes them feel accomplished. But I encourage you to read through those routines. They're pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, even, if you're a busy parent, trying to get all your kids out the door, including yourself for the day, maybe your morning routine, if you're not a quote unquote morning person, maybe it's wake up 15 minutes early to have lunches made before your kids wake up. And so you're not scrambling to make lunches while you're scrambling to, prep breakfast and get their shoes on and get their jackets and get out the door. Make that a little bit less stressful with just that 10-minute win to pack their lunches before, or, what's one thing that you can do prior to the craziness of your morning happening, just to set yourself up for feeling accomplished. Like you said, just having that feeling of accomplishment when your day starts, I think is the key part of that morning routine. So we typically end with the exit ticket. And I told you before the show that I was going to run you through the questions again. But to be perfectly honest, our first 3 questions just completely circle around the entire theme of this episode. So I feel like it would be slightly repetitive, but we have added 1 question since we had you on back on show 8. So we're going to ask you that, and then one final question from Matt, which is more of an action step for us. So the new question, the exit ticket, Mike, it's so easy to fall into facilitating a repetitive classroom. What do you think separates teachers who consistently seek change, innovation, and incorporating new teaching strategies into their classroom?
Yeah, understanding how the brain learns. and we have novelty-seeking brains, and repetitive is good for safety. The brain wants to feel safe, but after not so long, the brain starts scanning its environment for threats, right? That's kind of the principle behind novelty, and so you have to take advantage of that. How are you going to keep this kid's attention, right? And emotion drives attention, and attention drives learning. So how do I create these emotional states in the classroom that are good for learning? Because you know what? One of the things they don't teach you in school, they're doing it more and more, is that how I feel during content acquisition matters. It matters to creating meaning and creating sense around content. And those are the two non-emotional criteria for storing things in the long term, the core of our jobs. And so what I always tell people is the best available state manager available to you in a classroom is movement. And so, understanding that the brain needs novelty, it needs difference, take advantage of that. That's what separates those teachers.
That's awesome. And I know I mentioned this earlier in the episode. We are going to take up something I think you would love. Tomorrow is a global day of play across classrooms across the country and around the world. And so, especially with your passion related to kinesthetic classroom, but more so the social and emotional benefits of play and the physical, obvious, but also behavioral benefits and interacting. I'm excited to be involved and witnessing my kids in different ways. And I think that's some of the benefits that we see. How to win, how to lose, how to be competitive, how to team up, how do you, think through strategy, all these different features. So it seems like something that's right up your alley to experience tomorrow. But you have many other important things going on in your world. And with that being said, what would, I've really enjoyed this conversation because I feel like it's directly correlated to me being a teacher, but also me being a better human being. And one of the things that I know I've benefited from our previous conversation and tonight's is following along with how to be the best version of myself. So, Mike, what would be the best way to keep in contact, get more information about this upcoming book, and just continuing this conversation?
Yeah, so it would be I have two websites now. And one is my mainstay, MikeKuczala.com. And that last name is Kuczala, tough Polish last name, MikeKuczala.com. But then there's a new website that goes along with the book. And it's thepeakperformingteacher.com. And there you can find more about what I do in the way of services. And I'm going to have some live training this summer here in Pennsylvania, and there's an online course. And so all the resources, is a cool page where all the resources that I mentioned in the book, I mentioned some TED Talks and some other websites. There's a page dedicated to those things that you can check out from the book as well. I'd love to hear from people. Following me on Twitter is another. I use Facebook and Instagram more personally, but sometimes professionally, but also Twitter I use professionally. So I'm at Kinesthetic Class with one C in the middle. So yeah, that's how you can stay in contact. Love to hear from you and check out what I have to offer.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We will link to that website as well as your Twitter handle and different components there on our show notes page, which can be found at powereduup.com/show57. So like I said, everything will be there for you to click on. If you are listening to our show for the first time or you're watching us for the first time on YouTube, we encourage you and ask you to hit that subscribe button to follow along each week. We typically interview current classroom teachers, administrators, but we do have the opportunity to have some authors on and some keynote speakers as well to just help gain a better perspective on how to be the best teacher possible for our students, whether that's breaking down instructional strategies or, in this case, breaking down strategies to help keep ourselves in tip-top shape for our students. So, Mike, thank you so much for the time. I really enjoyed this conversation. I cannot wait to crack open this book and dive into these chapters and these habits because I feel like it's going to be practical and, like you said, a reminder for us, something to revisit multiple times throughout the year as we get that reminder. So I really look forward to that. And I encourage everyone, again, check this new book out, but also the Kinesthetic Classroom. If you're looking to bring in movement into your classroom, check out show 8, where we interviewed Mike. He'll dive into a lot of the key instructional strategies and show us how simple it can be and the benefits that it offers. So 2 great resources to really upgrade your classroom in a meaningful way. So, Mr. Rogers, why don't you take us on out of here?
All right. So first off, Mike, it seems only appropriate that we'll talk to you in about another 50 episodes from now.
All right.
Sounds great.
And thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. As we power down this episode, you did an incredible job powering us up. We're looking forward to seeing this be a great resource for educators and just really bring out that peak performance every day for our kids. That's what it all comes down to. So everyone stay well, stay happy, stay on top of the game. It's going to be digging through the last few weeks of winter. And then, the excitement of towards the end of the year comes in. So we'll be there before we know it. And with that being said, we'll talk to you guys next week.